John Rappoport has been an investigative reporter, researcher for many years, and has come up with a number of things that he has researched and have been revealed to him. Today he will talk about one of them. Secret ancient codes is probably something different than you have ever heard before. The way he gives readings on people is, to the best of my knowledge, quite unique, and will quite possibly tell you or give you information on things that might surprise you. His readings are, in my opinion, not the typical ones of everything is going to be great, because maybe it might not be the information that comes through to him. So he's investigated a lot of things. I want him to talk about as much as he can in the time available. Will you welcome John Rappoport, please, of Cardiff, California.
Thanks, Dean. Actually, this would be great. Okay. So I think we're all mic'd up. Can everybody hear me in the back there? Okay, good. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank Dean and everybody who's worked so hard to put this together. I know how much is involved in putting on one of these conferences. I've done some of that myself, and ran for Congress in Los Angeles in 1994, and so I know something about organization and how difficult it is to get people to turn off the TV and do anything. And so thank you very much. Some of you have received some literature there which might be a bit puzzling. So I want to talk about my wife for a couple of minutes, Laura Thompson. She is a PhD nutritionist and a person that I consider both subjectively and objectively to be one of the 10 or so best nutritionists in the world. So some of you have gotten a rough of our new supplement catalog, which has not come out in its final form yet, or a brochure about her. And I would just simply say at the outset, if you have any health problems and you understand that nutrition is intimately related to that, just call that 800 number and have a chat with her. She is excellent and has spent a great deal of her professional career researching the highest quality nutrients in the world, which are not usually to be found in health food stores. And there is a nutritional component to what I'm going to talk about today, although I'm not going to try to make all the links. But suffice to say that if somebody has severe nutritional deficiencies, and many people do, it's very difficult to get off the dime. You go up and you go down, and some things look good, and then after a while they start to collapse, and that needs to be attended to. I've been an investigative reporter for the last 17 years and have looked into many, many different kinds of scandals and monopolies and everything from the massive fraud that is institutional psychiatry to chemical company pharmaceutical fraud to CIA mind control experiments to what goes on behind the scenes politically in this country, to transnational corporate control of the planet and secret societies and so on. Have written for a number of newspapers and magazines in the United States and Europe, and have authored, I think it's 7 books now, some of which are available back at the bookstore. And I have a table back here that's got some tape series that I've just done before I got here. I think they also have some tapes back at the bookstore, so feel free to browse. But I've also been a painter for 35 years. And those two occupations seem to be contradictory, because on the one hand you're trying to investigate, but on the other hand you're trying to get a feel for what is really at the root of life. Because if you are creative in some way, you know that you're always dealing with life beyond the ordinary in some fashion. You're dealing with vitality. You're dealing with the question of what really gets you up in the morning. Why do you want to live? Why do you want to face the day? What could there be in your future that would be so exciting and thrilling and adventurous that it would bring you to a state of higher life within yourself? And so, on the one hand, I was spending all this time exposing the negative, and on the other hand, I was spending a lot of my time trying to absorb and express more life. How was I going to bring these things together? I was a serious, and still am, a serious reporter, like Linda Howe, whom you listened to last night. Very important to interview people, get their statements, the facts, as well as you can find them. Not merely speculating that the pink bloboids from Galaxy 12 are coming tomorrow, and therefore we can all hang it up, and that was not my style. And yet on the other hand, I knew that what really kept people going in their life is often something wild and weird and woolly. It's not facts. It's not really information always that keeps people alive and cooking and wanting to make new futures for themselves, but it's something very much internal. And when that internal thing starts to fade, that's when you get, the effect of, yeah, I'm on the cutting edge, but I can hardly stay awake. I'm out there with the best of them doing the most incredible research, but my eyelids are like vaults, safes that keep falling down, And what is going on with my own life? Part of my painting was to do a kind of calligraphy of ancient signs and symbols, in which I would research shapes and signs and symbols from Sumeria, from Egypt, from Africa, from Babylonia, from Israel, from everywhere, China, and see what seemed to be in many of these great symbols of art and religion and spirituality. And I played with these things for 30 years. They always fascinated me. And one day, what I would do is I would derive my own symbols from these symbols. But what did my own symbols mean? I hadn't the slightest idea. All I knew was when I put them on the page and I looked at them, something inside me would go zing, And I'm 61 years old now, and I'm still going zing, because there's something in that whole matrix of symbols that I was finding that was very energizing and very exciting. So I got the crazy idea one day that maybe I could actually arrange these symbols into codes. The symbols that I had derived myself from many ancient signs and symbols. And I began to play around with that. And I thought, well, a code ought to contain 26 symbols so that each symbol would correspond to a letter in the alphabet. And then I could take somebody's name and I could plug in the symbols and I could begin to read these symbols, perhaps, and see what happened. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was very excited at the prospect of penetrating beyond normal, everyday waking consciousness into a person's own consciousness and seeing what I could find there of significance. So I have a friend who's probably the best numerologist on the planet, lives in Los Angeles, and I said, look, I'm going to do a reading for you. I'm going to make a tape. He said, about what? And I said, you'll see. I'll just send you this tape and you see what you think. So I took his name and I plugged in the symbols and I began to read onto the tape what I was finding. Where was I getting this information from? From myself, from the symbol, from some kind of link up that was like a personal platform from which I could leap off into the unknown. And I found that each one of these symbols had literally hundreds of different meanings. It wasn't like if you have an A in your name and you have an A in your name, it's going to come out the same. It isn't like that at all. It's much more mysterious than that. And I did this reading for him that actually lasted about 2.5 hours on tape, and I sent it to him. And he got back to me. His mind was completely blown, and he said, I don't know what you're doing, but it's amazing. I've listened to it 4 or 5 times now. He said, where are you getting these symbols from? He said, for example, this one symbol called, how would it be literally translated? It's about a knight, K-N-I-G-H-T, the glass knight who rides out on the Black Sea. He said, where the hell does that come from? I said, I don't know, but if you notice, I talked about it for a half hour. He said, yeah, I know, and what you told me was something that healed a very old wound that I had. Also gave me some very major intimations about the future and what the possibilities really are for me beyond anything that I've really thought of before. I said, well, then we must be on the right track. He said, yeah, I'm going to give you some clients. And he gave me a few of his people, and the same thing basically happened with them. So I began to research on an intuitive level and on a reporter level the history, the hidden history of symbols. What are they really? What are they all about? And how do they relate to your consciousness, your individual consciousness? We start with the premise that your individual consciousness is infinite. You may not be aware of that. It may not be aware of that, but it is. That there are areas of your consciousness in which you are not aware, where there are some very deep energies and archetypes that could propel your life into a completely new space and dimension. But you're not tapping into that. I began to work with these symbols so intensely that I began to have intuitive insight into cultures and civilizations that are long gone, that make Sumeria look like, Brooklyn. Way back there, beyond Atlantis, beyond Lemuria, beyond anything that we normally talk about, into vast intergalactic spaces and civilizations and technological organizations of gigantic size. And instead of just rejecting all of that and saying, well, I can't prove it, I said, I'm just going to go with this and see what I can find out about how those people used symbols hundreds of thousands, millions of years ago. What was it all about? Because today, most people look at a symbol and they say, well, a symbol is something you use. It's a little label. It's a little tag for a little package of information, usually technical, sterile information. And I knew that wasn't true. And so here's what I found out. The hidden history of symbols. First of all, what is a symbol? A symbol is an idea, an energy that stands for something deeply embedded in your own consciousness. 2, originally all symbols were positive. There were no negative symbols. Every symbol existed for the purpose of the advancement of individual consciousness. A symbol was considered to be an alive entity, alive. And individuals worked with these images or symbols in certain kinds of meditative and visualizing ways in order to change their own expanded consciousness, to make it larger, to move their consciousness into what we would now call paranormal realms. The ability to do ESP, telepathy, mind over matter, precognition, remote viewing, whatever. That the majority of symbols going way back were extremely dynamic. For example, if we go back into ancient Greece and the symbol of Mercury, the messenger god, with that great helmet with the wings on it. You know, this is a guy who was going, phew, phew, phew. He was like the Silver Surfer, right? But yet, part of the whole panoply of the gods. This wasn't like, you will now meditate on the rose. You will now meditate on the mandala. You will now think about complete serenity and peace and... This was a much later development. The original symbols were extremely dynamic. They implied a huge range of action in life, of people who were energized, positive, adventurous, who could change their whole life in the wink of an eye, for whom the creative force was the spiritual force and vice versa. And there were thousands of these symbols that had been buried over time. And coming down toward the present, what we saw was that as spirituality became more institutionalized, people whose real agenda was the control of you and me and everybody else began to take certain symbols and use them as tools of mass hypnosis. And this is where everything turned 180 degrees. Originally, symbols were for the expansion of consciousness in the widest possible sense. But eventually, they were used as tools of mass hypnosis to get you to have a limited view of your own potential, of reality, of possibility, of your life, to delete the idea that you might have some internal guidance system of enormous importance, and to simply define your reality like, hey, reality, you know what I mean? Reality. You do this, you do that, and that's reality. See? And I can see that as I'm looking at some people and around the hotel and all, that that's kind of, the view that people come to. I'm very cutting edge, but hey, reality is reality. I mean, what do you want? You live, you die. Boom, boom, boom. That's it. Business is business. Hey, right? Where does this come from? I mean, people who have this view think, well, everybody ought to think this way. There's a bunch of crazy people running around, but, reality is reality. Where does this come from? Do you think that civilizations far beyond this system come down here and say, hey, reality is reality? They look at us like we're total lunatics out of some insane asylum. Who are these people running around saying, hey, reality is reality. It's a room. What do you want? It's a floor, ceiling, and that's life, and that's all there is. That's the craziness that's engendered by the use of symbols as tools of mass hypnosis. Finally, what you end up with is somebody who's sitting in a chair, looking at a TV set, his eyes going like this, going, hey, reality is reality. That's what you end up with. That's somebody who's been completely and beautifully hypnotized. Right? That's it. End of the line. That's when the train lets out. The conductor says, all right, everybody, Reality is reality. And everybody goes, yeah, reality is reality. All out here, and everybody gets out and clunk. That's it. So what I was finding out was that originally everything was absolutely the opposite. That when you looked at a person, and I'm not talking about somebody who is extraordinarily gifted or psychic, but everybody, you would look at people and you would see fantastic energies vibrating off their bodies. Blue, purple, red, zoom, green. People were alive to an enormous degree, and they considered this physical health, spiritual health, consciousness, creativity. It was all one. And slowly, over time, that vitality and consciousness and creativity and extraordinary ability to do these paranormal kinds of things which were originally considered to be just part and parcel of your own consciousness, all of that began to dribble away slowly. Dribble, 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 until finally you're left with, right? Why do you think we're so drawn to animals, right? If a tiger came walking down this aisle right now, looking at people, you know, aside from those who would flee immediately, you would look at him. And not just because you wanted to know whether he was going to kill you, but because it's alive. It's alive, right? It's alive. And where is that? Well, human beings just don't have that kind of vitality. We do Tylenol. Hey man, you want some Tylenol? We do aspirin. If we have to, we do codeine and Percodan and whatever it takes, you know. That's more human, you see. The pharmaceutical companies would have you believe that, of course. Because if everybody was a tiger, you know, there would be no drug store. The tiger is not walking into Save-On to see, what OTC drug do I need today? You know. The whale is not interested in Prozac. So as I began to do these readings for people on tape, and they began to listen to them, and I'm not trying to, you know, exactly stand around patting myself on the back, but it was clear that some spark of something was being transferred. And in the feedback and in the conversation and so forth, it was clear that in these readings, people were tapping into a part of themselves that had been asleep. Now I want to talk a little bit about archetype. For example, let us suppose that, and I'll go over this a couple times, that deep within your consciousness there is a thought form, very vivid, alive, it's there, right? And it is of the knight on the great mission to recover the lost object of magic that will confer power and restore harmony to the realm, right? And whether or not you say, hey, that's not reality, you know, it's in your consciousness, okay? How it got there is a whole other question that we can discuss. But let's suppose, just for the sake of argument, that buried deep within you is that archetype. This is the knight who goes out into mysterious realms, knows not where, encountering creatures of all manner of type and intention, and is there for the great mission to, you know, do exactly what I just said. But simply saying it to you doesn't wake it up. You go, yeah, maybe. So? But if you were sitting on that horse, riding through the fog east of, you know, the kingdom of Morgan Le Fay in some other realm, you would be the tiger. You wouldn't be asking that question. So my job, and what I try to do when I do a reading, is not say, well, you see this, that, but is to wake it up. To wake it up. So that now you're looking at that thing inside yourself. Well, that's what art does, doesn't it? If it's any good. I mean, haven't you ever walked out of a movie or a play or after being in a museum or somewhere or read a book where you felt, in this moment, right at this second, my life is completely changed. If I could only take this ball and run with it, everything would be different. But, hey, reality is reality, huh? But it isn't. We all, each one of us, have the capacity, no matter what is happening with us now on any level, to transform our lives and live it in a size that is truly staggering. It's like saying, I was operating down here on the first floor, and now I'm up here on top of the mountain. Wow. Everything is different. The perspective is different. The proportion is different. The whole deal is different. The ideas in my head are different. My energy is different. My feelings are different. So, what I found as I was doing readings for people is that each person would usually have 2 or 3 symbols connected with their name that were like the main event. The main event. For example, and this may sound incredibly bizarre, I found somebody who at some level of their consciousness that they might be totally unaware of was completely involved with the sun, S-U-N, in a very remarkable way. We're getting now into the idea of past incarnations and all of that, but basically imprinted in their consciousness was this capacity to deal with the sun in the original way of the solar, some people call them cults, but they're not really cults. The solar faiths, let's say. Originally, people were able to take the energy of the sun and by some internal mechanism transform it into immediate available energy now. Physical, emotional, consciousness energy. These people, and we're going back a long time, we're not just sort of stupid people who thought, gee, the sun is pretty good, let's worship that. Because it seems to be better than a tree, and it's certainly better than an ant. So let's go for the sun. How many people want to? Yeah, okay. So now every day we're going to worship the sun. It wasn't that way. As partial evidence, if you will, of that, I'll just simply present this. You take a little kid, right? This little kid has more energy than everybody in this room combined. Okay? Goes without saying. This kid gets up in the morning, eats some kind of slop, runs out of the house, plays all day, comes home reluctantly for dinner, eats something else, and wants to go out and play again until his parents insist that he comes back in and goes to bed, right? Now, I'm a health researcher, so I know a lot about health and nutrition. But there is no way that you can possibly pin down where this kid gets that energy from by referring to what he eats. That just doesn't add up. I don't care if, he's eating 12 tons of food a day, which he's not. The best food, the worst food, it just does not add up. The truth of the matter is that at an early age, somehow this kid has the capacity to internalize the forces of nature, air, wind, sun, sky, water, earth, fire if necessary, and transform it somehow into energy. We lose that ability after a certain period of time. And I told this to this person in this reading. I said, look, all I'm telling you is you have the most powerful connection to the sun that I've ever seen. Everything about you screams that fact. I don't know how far you have to go within yourself to find it, but I can see it. And if you know what's good for you, you'll go after it too in some way. I know you already feel an affinity for that. I know you're out there on the beach, you're in boats, whatever you're doing, you're taking photographs all the time. You love that salt energy. You've got to make that connection within yourself and stop obscuring it from yourself, because you have the capacity right now to make that kind of psychic transformation for yourself, at which point you're going to be 50 times more than you are right now. Where does that come from? There is no, it's not a, this is not conventional symbology. But he took that ball and ran with it, and this guy's life is no longer the same. I mean, on any level whatsoever. Or suppose we're talking about something like this. Okay, I'll just pick one out of the air because I can see it's floating around here. The battlefield nurse. Okay? The one who is out there when the soldiers are dying, screaming, blood, bullets everywhere, and she's down in there, guts and instruments and bandages and whatever, with the most extraordinary amount of courage, doing what she can to save these young men who are fighting for a cause that they truly believe in. She is the battlefield nurse. And paradoxically, at the same moment as she is under the most threat, fighting what to other people outside may look like the most ridiculous war for no good reason, she feels the most alive that she's ever felt. Okay? Now, I mean, I'll just tell you that there's about 4 or 5 women sitting here that have that symbol in their soul. What does it mean? It means simply that in the present life, you're the one who takes care of the people. You're the one who says, okay, the situation is horrible. There is no way out. My mind tells me to just split, but I can't do it. I'm here for the duration, and I'm taking care of whatever needs to be taken care of. I'm giving of myself, my time, my energy, my love, my compassion, my everything to this as best that I can. There's only one problem. There's a difference between doing that and sort of ultimately making the ultimate sacrifice of your own life over here, and over here tapping into all of the information and feeling and energy and consciousness and even, yes, paranormal healing ability that is embedded in this very live thought form called the battlefield nurse at work, that you don't really know about, but you use it in your life as a kind of unconscious navigational guide to show you where to go and what to do. Oh yeah, there's a person there that needs taking care of. Oh yeah, okay, set up shop, move in the stuff, bring in the food, do the thing, baby-de-bong, dungity-ding, dongity-ding. But it's very significantly different to raise that to a new level of consciousness in which you now know the gigantic proportions of the real archetype within you that could propel you into a whole new life in which it's not like, yeah, I take care of everybody, yeah, hey, reality is reality. See? From that to boom, right? To a whole new conception of yourself. I can't give you the little words for it. It's feeling, it's energy, it's largeness of space, where you say, I'm now going to create this in my own terms, right? That's what I'm going to do. That's a whole different deal. And when I've done readings for, actually one person who had that particular archetype of the battlefield nurse as very prominent, I talked about that for about 25 minutes on tape because it was so amazing with the material that was coming out. I mean, this was a person who was setting limbs and legs and putting spines back into shape and things that were impossible to do. But like the mother who can walk up to a car when her kid is trapped under the car and somehow, miraculously move that car to get that kid out of there, which has been recorded as having happened. In the same way, this archetype is of a phenomenal level of ability. And to begin to tap into that is absolutely amazing. Take business. I mean, I've done readings for businessmen and discovered things in these kinds of symbols. I won't try to pinpoint the symbols, but I mean, this guy's making, $300,000 a year, and okay, reality is reality, and whatever. And after a while, he begins to see that in his consciousness is a guy who has the capability of bringing such abundance into his life that we're talking about a real empire builder, because that's what really is in his consciousness. What he's doing in life is only a pale reflection of that incredible empire builder archetype or symbol. The difference is that now he could take an empire like that and make it into something good for everybody if he really wanted to, without sacrificing any of the sort of profit motive that he so dearly holds on to, like his last possession. This array of symbols that I'm talking about ultimately plugs into the sea of symbols. Millions of symbols. And the sea of symbols flows through our own consciousness. And from time to time in our experience, we grab one and we make it our own and we live it out. But now we tend to lose track of that vitality. And essentially what I've made myself do is to tap into that sea of symbols and begin to reflect back to people what it is about their own consciousness that is like the sleeping tiger. So that they can begin to see reflected in that something truly remarkable about themselves. But it's not all on the remarkable side, for example, because there are issues as well that come up. For example, take the issue of power. Occasionally, I will find a person for whom that's the whole kit and caboodle, baby. It's all about power. On the one hand, they feel like they're about to do something horrible if they use too much power that maybe they already have. On the other hand, there's like 27 Mount Everests of energy suppressed within their body because they can't express this tremendous amount of power within them. And so you've got an issue, right? Now this is going to sound stupidly simple, but if that person sits down every day, that person, with his eyes closed for 10 minutes and visualizes the word power, that's all. Feels it, senses it, smells it, tastes it, rolls around in it, looks at it. Material is going to begin to bubble up and boil up from that person's consciousness of a huge amount of material and imagery and past lives and regrets and remorse and horrible and great and wonderful. And there's a good chance that after 6 months or so, that person's life is going to be completely different. That they're going to feel that they can express that power now, here, in its full dimension. Not, not like, well, I'm living my life like this, and now I want to know whether I should continue to do this, or whether I should do this. Or should I do it over here? How do we get into that state? It's all about nu-nu-ni-ni-ni-ni. I want to know if I should nu-nu-ni-ni over here, or do you think I should nu-nu-ni-ni over here? Right? Holy mackerel, right? I want to know whether I should be a wooden statue over here, or over here. That's my problem. No, it isn't. So it's all individual. It's all about you, your consciousness. Now I want to give you just a little bit of something before I take questions here, and that is the whole history of, for example, the Roman Church can really be seen on the esoteric level as being an institution whose mission is to pervert symbols. That's what they're all about. We'll take these symbols and we'll completely pervert them. Let's make this thing up called Satan, and let's just scare the living crap out of everybody with this one, right? And then let's make the Satan look like a snake. So we'll really paralyze everybody. And then let's invent this tree. We'll call it the tree of life, or the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And we'll tell people that they're not allowed to eat anything off that tree. Because, why? Because they might get too smart? No, we won't tell them that, because we'll tell them because it's bad, it's evil. So we'll have the snake offer the apple of the tree to Eve, you see, because that's Satan tempting her. We'll take all these symbols that mean something completely different, okay? For example, the real meaning of the serpent, and if you have it in your consciousness as key, then you've really got it. If not, it's just of interest, is the real symbol of the serpent is the one like this, where the head meets the tail, the rolling hoop of the serpent. What is that all about? That is the circulation of energy continually through the system, building up power, not running down like in the physical world, no entropy. It's free-flowing energy, and the one practice on this planet relates to that, or two, is Kundalini Yoga, the coiled serpent at the bottom of the spine, or better, Tantra, as in tantric ecstasy. The release of sexual energy, of life energy, of all manner of energy, destroying the blocks, destroying the obstacles, destroying the barriers, so that the energy begins to spiral upward in the body, and beyond a certain point, energy and consciousness are the same thing. So that as that energy increases, so the consciousness increases. And so I have given people, certain people, who had that symbol prominently in their consciousness. I said, look, you're going to visualize the snake, that hoop. And I explain how to do it and all of that, which I'm going to do in the workshop. I hope some of you will show up tonight for that, because we're going to go into all of this in detail. I'm going to give you a few symbols to meditate on, so that you'll see firsthand what is possible for you in just the terms I'm talking about here. But what begins to happen to a person for whom that symbol is key is the release of enormous amounts of energy within them. Sometimes uncomfortable. Sometimes, I don't know, I'm losing my nu-nu-ni-ni-nu-nu. I'm losing my wooden tree status. I'm no longer sitting by the TV set saying, hey, reality is reality. Instead, I feel like I'm, in a boat going over a waterfall. Right. That's called life. And for a person like that who is meditating on that symbol, the energy becomes fantastic if he keeps at it long enough. That's what that symbol means. It's basically a symbol of life. So what does the church do? Hey, evil, death. Let's do it that way, okay? So if we can hypnotize people with that symbol, we make them prefer death to life. Ultimately, isn't that what we're doing? Yeah, great. I love it. Right? That kind of deal. The sea of symbols is an enormously fertile area for the expansion of consciousness, the transforming of life. That's what I'm interested in. That's what I do. That's why I do these readings for people. That's what it's all about. It's not like, did you have a bicycle when you were 5 that you lost? And where's that letter somebody sent you? And it's not like that. Okay. I'm open to questions. Feel free. Let's do it.
A question regarding arrival at the awareness of symbol within self. Does it take someone else to help to catch that, or can you catch it on your own? If so, how in combination?
Absolutely can catch it on your own. It helps. It helps the people that I do readings for. I can't talk about anybody else. Definitely helps. Working with the symbol in a way of visualizing it in meditation, but not necessarily as we normally think of those practices, does a great deal to awaken some of these deep well springs in consciousness. And most of these great symbols are now in poetry. And of course people say, poetry? What good is that? Right? Well, how do you think the Bible hooked everybody? Do you think they had, hacks writing that thing? Some of the greatest poetry in the English language is in the book of Revelations. This is wild stuff if you just read it as poetry. So, pick up a book by, Dylan Thomas and start reading. Yes?
How can we discover some of these symbols inside our own auric field?
First of all, you have to get rid of the idea that they're conventional. Okay? This is a big one. People are always looking for the triangle. Where is the triangle? Where is the circle? Where is the expanding, tie-dyed T-shirt? We're all bombarded with these huge numbers of conventional symbols, and we're all, thinking, that's what I'm going to find when I look in my aura. Yes, you will. But you got to go past that, okay, into something that has such a tremendous emotional resonance with yourself that it kind of takes you away. Now, what's the search like? You've got to have something outside yourself, I would say, to compare it to. What attracts you in life? Is going to a museum the most boring thing in the world for you, or is it very exciting? Do you want to be jumping out of a plane? See? What is it? Somehow, in that arena of life that really excites you the most, if you begin to explore that, you're going to find a phrase, or it's going to be a visual image, or it's going to be a shape of some kind. It may be more complex than you think it's going to be, that will eventually pop out to you. A phrase, maybe. But you've got to explore it. And you can't go, oh yeah, well that was 5 minutes, I'm tired now, it's time to eat some sugar and watch TV. I mean, this is, get into it. Yes?
I'm interested in the hierarchy of symbols, and I'm curious about the sine wave as an example. On the one hand, you mentioned that the Ouroboros, the snake that eats its tail, is sort of the proper, I guess in your mind, symbol for the serpent, the flow of energy. On the other hand, if you look at the Mayan symbology, for example, there is an eagle, there is a snake, and there is a jaguar, representing in their interpretation God the Creator, the serpent representing what we would call in Christian terms the Holy Spirit or Spirit, the movement of the Creator into creation, the manifestation, if you will, into the creation itself, which is represented by the jaguar, which can also represent the ego, physical creation, the body, and so on, depending on the context. What I'm wondering are there prototypal symbols under which a number of archetypes might be grouped? In other words, does one symbol, in a sense, generate many others, if you follow me?
I do follow you. I think the answer to that last question is definitely yes. One symbol can generate many others. And there's the easiest way, I think, to see that is that if a painter takes a certain symbol and paints it on the canvas, and then somebody says, okay, that's the starting point now, what else are you going to do? And he begins to think about that symbol. All kinds of fantastic things are going to spin off from that. Yes, symbols do generate other symbols. As far as the hierarchy, though, this is where I think we have a bit of a misconception is not the right word. I think to myself, this is part of the hypnosis. In other words, for example, in the mythological structure that you just painted, about the snake and the jaguar and so forth. The reason that thing is so fantastic is because it's alive to those people. I mean, it's not like, oh yes, Professor, I remember the monograph you wrote about the jaguar in 1935 in Paris. Yes. This is like real stuff. Until it isn't. Until what usually happens in cultures is that the main conventional symbols become hardened. They become stale. They become sort of sterile after a while, and everybody goes, oh yeah, right. Sure. Great symbol. Great symbol. Love God. Had lunch with him the other day. He's a fantastic guy, So my answer to the hierarchy thing is, I don't believe that there is one. I think that is part of the hypnosis trick. Because if you build a hierarchy of symbols, oh yes, you see on level 1 we have these, and it builds up in a sort of fashion, and finally we get one that generates all the others. We're talking about a kind of a machine. And by the time you exhaust yourself getting up to the top of that, usually, because we're humans, we're much more interested in the system than we are the life of the thing by the time we get to the top. And that tells me that something is awry there. So what I always come back to is you and your consciousness. In your consciousness, you've got some of these powerful symbols that are extremely rejuvenating potentially to your life in a fantastic way. Once you get rolling, consciousness is just going to continue to expand, and you're going to find new areas to work in. If there is one force, perhaps, or aspect of consciousness that I consider the most important, it's the creative part. Because giving that one away really gives the whole store away. Then you're really just on the... Then it's a constant search for a greater authority of some kind. Whereas if we're all creative in a true sense of that word, I believe we're going to find eventually the fullest degree of life that that we want. But it's not just noodling around. It's not just, 5 minutes. It's a big deal. And that's why when I do readings for people, what I'm trying to do is, in a way it's exhausting, but it's very rewarding. It's like taking something in their consciousness and holding it up to them and saying, you see this? Now, I'm going to show it to you. I'm not going to just say, oh, this is what it is. I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to tell you stories about what this really means and what it really is and where it really goes and where you can go with it and how you can go with it. So it's in the telling as well as the symbols. Because, and I'll finish with this, when symbols changed and became tools of hypnosis, people became the audience. Right? Yeah, it's a symbol, yeah. But always in the audience, you see. Because that's what hypnosis is all about. But when the symbol becomes the living thing that you work with, then everything turns around a whole 90 degrees, 180 degrees. It's a whole different ball game. And we're not used to this kind of thing. I know this sounds a little unusual to some of you because we're not used to this kind of approach. We want to know, okay, where is it? And, how do I define it? And how do I, do I stick it in my eyeball, or can I capsulize it or inject it? What do I do? And the answer is none of the above. And I hope I see you guys tonight, and thank you very much.